It's 12:14. We'll get started here in just a minute or two. We'll allow people to get on and we'll get rolling here no later than 60 seconds from now. There was a bunch of interesting stories too this time of year where, underdogs or people who missed an opportunity or got an injury and had to take a year off or go to another school and then get into a Penn State. Kim's been taking some courses and I dove into watching some of those. They're like 30-minute clips on this new. Yeah, it was kind of neat. It didn't matter whether basketball or some stuff on swimmers, but because there's basketball wrestling going on, you have to listen to some stories. And then when you go back and you see some of the kids that are playing, some of their background, their story just makes it a little bit more.
Yeah. Should know the backstory.
Yeah. Penn State, I think I understood that they won the NCAA tournament before the finals even started.
Yeah, we didn't watch it, but we watched the points and they had like a ridiculous, they were like up by like 148 points in the second place. It was in the 60s the day before.
Yeah,
it was interesting.
Crazy. All right, I think we should go ahead and get started here. Welcome everybody to session 3 of a 3-part session, and we'll get this kicked off and rolling to keep everyone on track. So Scott and Stacy here. We've gone through introductions before, but just real quickly, I'm involved with the ownership of Catamount Consulting. Catamount Consulting does everything from safety training to leadership training, development, working with athletes, leaders, peak performers across the board, as well as we get into some artificial intelligence things. We've got industrial hygiene areas that we play in. So you can check us out on our website. We do a vast array of things in general around most of the construction and mining industries where we spend a lot of the time, but it's not just that. And Stacy's on this call as well and has been involved with the webinar all along. Stacy's primary function, I guess I would put you inside of the curriculum development for peak performance besides helping run Catamount, but more in that direction would be where you focus your time.
Right, yeah, in the leadership and content development space. And then, we've sort of, we could kick off of what we've been up to lately, to give you an idea of all the spaces that we've sort of put our feet in the water with, all within this wheelhouse of leadership and training the brain and emotional intelligence, and just how comprehensive it is in whatever space that you're working in.
Good idea. Yeah, it's really not specific to only construction and mining. The content that's covered inside of the leadership development, the content that we've been covering inside of these last few webinars around adaptability and accountability and leadership in general, or emotional intelligence, it's coined as, it's a good approach for working with youth athletes. It's a good approach for families, moms and dads and husbands and wives and relationships, but working with employees. So it doesn't really matter which direction you're working in. The exciting part about it is the content's very applicable to every industry we work with. So a little bit of what we've been working on in general, 2024 is really no difference than 2023 and 2022 and the years before that, is specifically working with numerous construction and mining firms. We've got some that are new and some that we've been working with for 3 or 4 years, and really have enjoyed watching the growth and all that. We've started to play around with the local police forces via their police academy. So in multiple regions, if you're going to become a police officer, you have to go through an academy, and generally the city and the counties have their academies and the state police have their own academies. And that's how it is in New York. So we've been working with them, which has been exciting. They have a lot of trauma that they're dealing with and stress that they're dealing with, and busy schedules, not much different than the rest of us in the industry we work in, but it's a much different component from what we're typically dealing with. It's postseason now for a lot of our athletes, whether it's high school or college. So all of our athletes are coming to a close and spending a lot of time on making sure they're prepared for the last big game, the last big moment, which is what we're talking about as we kick off the webinar. So there's some different things that we're rolling with.
Yeah, and it's fun, when we refer back to the police academy, it's really neat to be in the project because it's sort of groundbreaking for them. they're creating a new layer to their training to bring in this, mindset and peak performance type content, which they haven't been able to do before. So we're in, sort of the initial building phases of it, and it's been a great experience for us, and we're happy to be involved in creating something that'll be beneficial, hopefully for, a long time down the road, because it's so needed. Especially in that space, when you talk about peak performers, and it only makes sense, when we look at athletes, they train their physical bodies, but is equally as important as their 6-inch space between their ears. So we're excited to be part of that project and help, get that up and running. And then Scott mentioned, in the athletic space, we just went to New York State Athletic Administrators Conference in Saratoga, where we got to see some of the athletic administrators across the state of New York. And same thing applies, when we look at what we're talking about, sort of wrapping up today with adaptability in the sense of where it falls into leadership, is any space that you're in to be adaptable to the challenges and the obstacles that we face. We need to, consider this emotional intelligence component to everyone in all the areas we work in. So
We use equal a lot, and I would argue as a previous coach, I've since retired from coaching high school athletics. I'd argue as time goes on, the mental performance side is more important than the physical fitness and the understanding of the technique and the rules and the regs inside of the athletic world. It's not meant that we can't do those other things, but it's just so important with athletes to make sure that we show up and ready to perform. And I would argue that also with everything else we do. So I don't know if I could put an equal to it or not. I really think that it's multifaceted.
yeah, so we'll continue to dive in today, and we want to sort of leave you with some takeaways, or how do we sum this experience up? And it's we started out with sort of the beginning phases of what is emotional intelligence, what is perspective taking, how do we learn to be more comfortable in uncomfortable situations. We talked a lot about comfort zones and really the role that comfort zones plays into considering new strategies or considering things, new ways of doing things, which is in essence adaptability. So let's look at some, examples or tools that we can leave you today, and how we become more adaptable, especially in the times that we're dealing with currently.
Training and coaching, this is not something that we coined. This is something that someone else coined, but we really like this industrial athlete mentality around all of the stuff that we talk about. And it doesn't matter what is going on, whether it's starvation, it's wars, it's drugs, it's social media, it's some silly thing that a celebrity is doing on Facebook. There's a lot of things that are completely out of our control, but make no mistake about it, we feel specifically that good leadership or better leadership, better management would also take care of some of those things. And inside of the areas that we can control, like our business and the people that we surround ourselves with, put all the time and effort you can inside of this, training your industrial athlete, training the mentality, making sure that we're available to train and coach those folks. That's going to be the best thing that we can invest our time and money into. Again, we can't control everything that's going on around us. We can't even control what other companies are doing, but you personally have complete control of what your company is doing and what you're doing with your people. So I really like this industrial athlete conversation.
And I like the word, it's a holistic approach. So it's the brain, the body, it's taking it as a whole, as opposed to just focus on physical skills, right? Focus on the job components. It's a holistic, encompassing approach to it, because really that's the key to being the peak performance or the self-actualizer that we've talked about in the past when we talk Maslow's, how we stay motivated, especially in difficult times or through obstacles. So adaptability, if we dive into that, really we touched on it the last session that we had, and focused in on the fact that adaptability and emotional intelligence are so directly related, right? The skill, that means your ability to adjust your actions, your reactions, or your skills to the changing environment. Well, your ability to do that is directly dependent upon your EQ skills, your emotional intelligence skills, right? Your ability to control and manage your own emotions and behaviors, as well as influence others around you. So adaptability and EQ are hand in hand. And ultimately, your failure to adapt is your failure to survive. Whether we're talking about as a species or if we're talking about as an organization, really the downfall is your inability, when we talk as an organization, your inability to consider other perspectives or other ways of doing things that will be your downfall. Staying too rigid in some of your perhaps outdated beliefs and traditions or customs is really what is going to allow others to sort of hurdle over you into the next the next wave of obstacles and things that we have to face. So let's start off, I think.
But I would push in here real quickly because I know we're not spending a lot of time in artificial intelligence, but that is one that we're going to have to make sure we adapt to. I remember 20 years ago, which all of us can relate to, and we all had a flip phone and said, we're never going to own one of those smartphone things. It's stupid. It's too gamey. And we rely on it now. The average person isn't more than 8 inches from their
Right.
smartphone device. So it's I think back if we chose not to do that and chose to simply just bypass it and we're still using a flip phone, how far behind would we be at this moment in time? And I look at artificial intelligence similar. I mean, we're not gamers, we're not young either. It's it's a little bit confusing,
Mhm.
but just stay in front of it and
Right.
play with it a little bit, understand a little bit. There's going to be experts that we can always pull in. If it's going to be useful for our business, help streamline things, great. But then there's other things also that we have to adapt to, which is really, I know the direction you're going in, but there are things that we can easily adapt to or change.
So I always like to start off with a tried and true overcome obstacle adaptability story. So one of the greatest adaptability stories dates back to the early 20th century when we looked at 1920s. The South was being devastated by this little pest called the boll weevil. And it was an insect that I think originated out of Mexico and basically ate the seeds of cotton plants. So it had caused some major destruction in the cotton industry. And like many small southern towns, there were specific areas of the South that were completely financially dependent upon the crops that they harvest. So facing this invasive pest and the devastation that had caused to many other areas in the South, this little town called Enterprise, Alabama, decided that they would find a way to adapt to the pest. They knew it was coming. They knew there was really no mechanism for them to stop and prevent it. And their financial economy was completely dependent upon the cotton crops that they harvested. So what they decided to do, which was innovative for their times and was a adaptive measure to the fact that they needed to continue in their wheelhouse farming, they decided to try a completely new crop that had never been tested or tried before, and they got into the business of peanut growing. And as it went on, it became very successful, and I think they're still known as one of the largest production or producers of peanuts in the South. But what they did was they adapted and completely found a new way to overcome this obstacle. Whereas many other neighboring states didn't have that innovative or approach, different perspective or lenses to look through, and would never consider something as great as a change of completely getting onto a new line of work in the crops that they planted. So a great little underdog story of the success that changing up your game plan in the farming industry played. And what's neat about this, in this little picture here, you see there's this crazy Greek almost statue in the middle of their town still to date, that's holding this. You can't see the top of it here on the slide, but holding this boll weevil, which they town and they celebrate is part of their heritage and part of the success and part of the reason that they still exist and are a successful community today. So
don't they have parades over it? They have
do.
the School of Holidays. They have that's a big thing, right?
Yeah, they take advantage of it, and everything you see, you'll walk around town and there's statues of this insect that they decorate and have different themes. Almost reminds me of like how they have the horses in Saratoga, but it's all dedicated to this nasty little bug.
Yeah, so it's just a really powerful story on you can't just live with the way it is. You may have to make some adjustments and adapt to it, which I think is very powerful.
Yeah, so the uncertainty we face is very easy to get into this sort of negative mindset. And if you go to the next slide, Scott, it sort of spells out, what is the uncertainty we face now? We definitely have political uncertainty. Spend, a minute on the news and you'll see exactly, what you don't want to see. It's a bit of a mess. And if you start to really think about that and let that infect your brain, you can sort of down spiral into this negative mindset that you feel almost helpless or the obstacle is too big. We've obviously got economic turmoil, we're dealing with inflation, interest rates. And then we get into more of the, organizational, when we talk generation gaps and the different generations that we work with. Gallup currently states that Gen Zs and millennials make up about 48% of the workforce. In the next 5 to 10 years, that'll be up to closer to the 65-70% range. So how do we find the tools and the strategies now that we can navigate the different generations and the gaps and the different ways that our soft skills are wired within those generations? So if we look at this and we focus only on the negative and we focus, well, we're going to wait for things to change, wait for the next election, wait for the interest rates to go down. We don't know when that's going to be. We don't know what that looks like. And the waiting and doing nothing strategy and continuing on the same strategy or old behaviors isn't really a productive or peak performer way of handling it. So when we look at tools for mindset, what can we suggest for you? And something as simple as what we call neutral thinking might be the way to navigate. So if we look at neutral thinking versus, you always hear positive thinking is great, but it's almost like an advanced or an AP level of thinking. If we look into meditation and imagery, all great tools, but very high level skills. So let's keep it simple and bring it back to the basics. And we recently stumbled across a great sports psychologist. Unfortunately, he passed away in the last couple of years, but he was sort of this inventor of this neutral thinking philosophy. Trevor Moawad was his name. He worked with a lot of different very successful college sports teams. But it's this concept of, let's not think of it in a negative light or a positive light. Let's keep it neutral, right? You can't get from reverse to drive without going past neutral. So thinking of it neutrally, sort of taking the emotion out of it. Here's what we're dealing with now. Instead of putting emotion to it to make it positive or negative, let's put a plan to it. So it's action, right? Action changes everything. As simple as, if I refer to the news, study shows that only 3 minutes worth of watching the news can increase your chances of having a really crappy day by 27%. I mean, just mind blowing. And if you think about, I look at my own parents, and when I walk next door, they live next door to me. The news is constantly on. They're watching it all day. And then I wonder why I have to give a speech to my kids when they come back from their house and say, Mama and Papa are just a little old, so let's be mindful of, some of the things they say, we can't take them, too wholeheartedly because they're negative.
Right.
But they sit and they watch the news. So be mindful of that and let's focus on some neutral thinking.
And I would argue that everybody who works with us could be into these sections, right? I mean, they don't have to be our parents or our grandparents to be diving into the news or having political uncertainty, or perhaps you add student debt or all these other things. I mean, there's a lot of difficulties. So if they're constantly focused on the negative, what do they bring into the table when they come to work and their engagement level? This is a little bit off topic of where we're going, but it's really, really important that you recognize that these are a major component, and anything that you can do to make sure that we're minimizing the negative mindset is a key component.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of science that you could share with us regarding now when I'm thinking about it, and I'm not only watching it, but now I'm actually saying it, right? So now when you go over to mom and pops,
Yeah.
they're saying that the world is falling apart, and they're saying that the ozone is dead, right? I mean, there's a power
Right.
of saying it increases it even more so.
So that is interesting. It's it's this 10x effect. So with any thought, so let's take neutral or positive thought. When you verbalize that thought, you've now 10x'd it. So it's 10 times more powerful or have greater influence over your behaviors and your emotions. When you add negativity into that verbalization, now you've just increased that power by 4 to 7 times. So now we're talking 70x power that negative thought has in influencing the behaviors and the emotions of the people, of yourself and the people around you. You can literally, there's tons of stories that go along with this. One that is just mind blowing. You can literally think yourself to death by staying in this negative mindset. And, I know that one we like to share, which is powerful. It's with regard to the gentleman who worked on the refrigerated
Yeah,
boxcars.
his biggest fear, he was a maintenance person for a boxcar on a train. And the boxcar was designed for refrigeration and it was broken and he had to get it fixed. But his biggest fear, he verbalized the previous in multiple different times to his coworkers and his employer, et cetera, that my biggest fear is getting locked into one of those boxcars. So as the story goes, he gets locked into a boxcar. And I don't know how many days this goes on, but over the course of a few days, he's in this boxcar. And there's a pencil in there or a piece of chalk. And over the course of the time that he's locked in there, he starts writing notes on the wall. I'm locked in a boxcar. I don't ever want to be locked in a boxcar. I'm really lonely in this boxcar. It's getting very cold in the boxcar. I'm freezing to death. It goes on. And his last one is I'm not going to live through this being locked in the boxcar, in so many words. And they found him in there, passed. He deceased inside of this boxcar. Well, there was no lack of oxygen. And not only was there not a lack of oxygen, it wasn't even cold. The coldest the boxcar got was 56 degrees. The refrigerated system wasn't even functioning. So he literally died of a lack of hope and a lack of faith in someone being able to save him. He thought himself, as Stacy was saying, negativity, thought himself to death. And you can look up as many as you want prisoner of war stories. And there's a lot of those POWs had a similar situation. I mean, it's a really, really bad scenario to be locked into a 8x8 cell for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. Awful lot of men died inside of those cells, and they contributed to a lack of hope. I mean, this is where I'm going to end my life. There's no hope of ever getting saved. And the ones that did get saved always said that optimism wasn't the best avenue. It was an adapting or the neutral mindset, however that falls into play in that situation, is what saved those people. They had faith in the process and they were able to put themselves in a neutral process. So lots and lots of really interesting stuff as it relates to negativity. I would just move on from here by saying, if there's something that we can do inside of organizations, one thing I would absolutely do is eliminate negative talk on any of our projects, any of our job sites. It's too hot. I don't really like the boss. The job's taking too long, right? Eliminate externally saying negative things is going to decrease the chances of negative stuff coming as an outcome. Yeah. If we kind of summarize that a little bit.
Yeah, and it all, so you say, why are we talking, mindset? Well, it all falls under the wheelhouse again of emotional intelligence, training our brains, finding strategies to stay out of our limbic state, be composed, right? Yeah. Not fall into this spiral of negative thought and thinking. Again, all affecting our mental health, our well-being, and the way that we show up and how engaged we are. If we're completely consumed in negative talk and negative verbalization, and not taking appropriate measures to train our brains and self-care and this holistic approach, we show up unengaged, we show up in a dysregulated brain, and we're not productive and best versions of ourselves, and we're not productive and safe for the organizations we work with. So ultimately, all comes back to this: leadership is the answer, and needing to spend time and energy in training these emotional intelligence skills. So, what does that really mean? What are employees, if we look at some of these things that we've laid out on the table as obstacles or the current state of affairs, not too much that we can do right now with the political candidates, not too much that influence that we can have over the current interest rates or the economy. Mm-hmm. But we looked at that list and we saw some things with regard to generational gaps and some soft skill gaps. Well, what's the answer, right? So employees, what are our generations telling us they want? So we know we're going to be in a situation in the next 5 to 10 years, we have 70% workforce of millennials and Gen Zs. According to Gallup, those particular generations want an organization that cares about employees' well-being, where leadership is ethical, right? And where the organization is diverse and inclusive of all people. These are straight out survey results and studies that were done by the Gallup poll. So how do we provide that? Again, it all goes back to, we provide this by training leadership and training emotional intelligence and empathy skills within our organization. If we look at, where do we start with it? I would say the starting line is to really be self-aware. So if we look at, self-awareness and this concept of always continuing to go back and owning what areas we need to be more emotionally agile or adaptable on within ourselves as leaders. It reminds me of sort of this constant work you're within this paradox. So a paradox is almost like a contradiction, but it's the juggling or this agility that you need as a leader to be, and this comes from the 8 Paradoxes of Great Leadership, a great resource that really talks about the spectrum of the many hats that you have to wear and skills that you have to have within this emotional intelligence space, but be timely and timeless, right? So stick to your timeless methods and strategies and tools that have proven successful and will withstand the test of time, but also be very open and adaptable to some of the newer things, newer strategies and cutting edge techniques and products and services that you can, look at and start to master. Be strong-willed, but be open-minded, right? So, make sure that you have a firm confidence in your leadership and your strategies, but also be very open-minded to, perspectives that you haven't considered or that you need more work in. And then I love this one, always be a teacher and a learner, right? So you're providing the content and resources that you need as a teacher to the people you work with, but also you're there equally to gain value and learn from them, learn perspectives.
I love it. I mean, the 3 bullet points, or so many more that could be here, but I always like to summarize this idea or this thought process on, there's no such thing as bad employees. They're just bad leaders or bad supervisors. And I know that's a bit of a stretch for some of us to be able to wrap our head around, but it's the only thing that we have control over is ourselves and our leadership team and the people that are involved in that process. And fix that and everything else will fix itself, generally speaking. If you constantly point fingers at everyone else around you being of a generation that's young, or this artificial intelligence is going to kill everything, right? Those are things that are out of our control. What we can control is being timely, all right, and being open-minded. I like the fact that we're talking about teaching and coaching, right? You can't teach and coach unless you're teachable and coachable. So it's a complete ownership of myself. And as a coach, I have to take complete ownership of myself and helping everybody around me get exactly what they want, and I will in turn give exactly what I want. So I think there's a lot that we can talk about here, but I know we have to move on here.
Yeah, so we talked about the starting line, starting down this road is it begins with self-awareness, and we've talked about this a little bit before in studies. Again, if we look at how many people actually are self-aware of their mood, their energy, and their mindset, and it's startling that 95% of the people that we work with are completely unaware of their mood, energy, and mindset, and just are oblivious to the behaviors that they have and the interactions that they have. And again, that goes back to training in the emotional intelligence space, to really understand social cues and have the ability to better regulate our own behaviors and emotions and be self-aware of it. If you go to the next slide, Scott, there's a quote that I love. I don't know where it's from. I saw it within a passage that was on a post that was specific to, without self-awareness, there's no starting line. So you can read as many books, you can consume as much content, but if you're unable to read yourself, be aware of your mood, energy, and mindset, you're never going to learn a thing. So it's a hard, for some people, a hard concept to really turn the mirror and look at themselves deeply and own some things that they need to clean up. But that's really where all of this begins when we talk about the ability to take new perspectives and go down this road of how can we be more emotionally agile or be adaptable.
Yeah, some of the by far most unsuccessful supervisors that we've been around are certainly the ones that are suggesting, I've done this for 30 years. I don't need any additional emotional intelligence. I know exactly how to deal with people. Look at how productive I am, right? They're just totally unaware of how much better they could be if they added other layers. They're totally uncoachable. They're uninterested in the learning process. it's even more sad to me when I'm dealing with someone who's in their twenties doing this. And that's also a thing. There's certain people who feel that they know everything they're gonna know. They're very fixed mindset. They're not gonna learn anymore, and this is what you get. And they're gonna slowly but surely be weeded out. Like Stacy's mentioning a lot about the Gallup polls. Gallup poll said that billions of dollars. The last number I saw is $550 billion will be lost in our country due to unengaged staff. And staff are unengaged because leadership is unengaged and leadership isn't helping in the people business. Their staff is stealing from us, lying, they're taking extra long breaks, right? How do you fix that? It has everything to do with the people first skills inside of our leadership team, our coaches. So it's all around what we're talking about. And I would add to this, Stacy, that almost anybody, I would like to say everybody, but everybody could start. It's who's gonna finish is gonna be the important one. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And if you've ever watched a marathon start on TV, there's this huge pile of people and not all of them make it. I mean, you go to the finish line and fast forward, a very small percentage actually make it. And it's important to understand that you gotta put in the time, you gotta put in the effort, you gotta drink water along the way and put in the energy bars, however you want to analyze it. In this situation, add content to your peak performance skills and constantly be in a learning position, and don't be fixed mindset, be growth mindset. There is always things that you can add to your game to get to the finish line. So that's the fascinating thing. But I know we're getting close to the end here, and I want to make sure that we have some time to close things up, but we got a question that came in while, 2 or 3 slides ago. The question was, is there any suggestions that you have or that we have that you would have for being adaptable in 2024 and beyond? Maybe some more specifics is what the question was asking.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to, try and give some context, I think of in the construction and mining industry, if you look at the obstacle and dealing with some compliance issues that we see, I think of what are the cutting edge or timely type tools that we might have available to help us navigate that world a little bit.
Yeah, adaptability to regulatory. We've got DOT, we've got MSHA on the mining side, surface and underground, we've got OSHA on the construction side, and we've got general industry OSHA. We've got all kinds of rules and regulations. And my prediction, I've been in safety for a long time. I've been inside of this leadership space as well, but inside of the safety space, the job of the enforcement folks is partial to seek and cite. And my early prediction is that we're going to be continuing to look for ways to increase the revenue stream inside of the government organization, if you will. And I would argue that we're going to see more enforcement. We're going to see more DOT tickets, more MSHA, more OSHA, whatever it is that you're in. So adaptability on that side is look at tools. We work with an organization that has some compliance software that has artificial intelligence built in. It's a compliance software program. Their current program that is completed is MSHA WISE. This is just a good example. It's MSHA WISE, and essentially it's a safety director, it's a attorney, it's all in one bundle. So you can punch in things that are in like guarding on equipment or your backup alarm on your wheel loader on a job site, for example, and it'll lay out the rule, the regulation, the letters of interpretation, give you guidance on it, how courts have judged against it or for it in different court cases. That's a good tool. That's a good example for adapting moving forward, taking advantage of the software that we're going to be able to get with artificial intelligence and all the other data. And if any of us are on the call that have tried to dive into the OSHA website or the MSHA website, it's complicated. There's a lot of layers to it. So this could streamline stuff. I often also think about just adaptability, this whole conversation of work life, home life, right? I don't really see a work life, home life. I just see it as life.
Yeah, I think the adaptability factor there is considering areas and again, taking this holistic approach of you're really doubling down and offering and making sure that you have this approach within your organization of, taking care of and finding tools and content that you can provide to your employees around mental health and mental resiliency, really. So, what do you promote as an organization for self-care strategies? that are really going to help improve and help someone, navigate some of these difficult times and challenges and be more mentally resilient. And for those type of things, what initiatives and how much of a focus do you put onto tools and strategies that will improve your mental resiliency, like exercise and nutrition and sleep and habits that are restorative versus more indulgent. So really focusing in on this mental resiliency and self-care strategies for your employees, I think would be an adaptable approach that, maybe we haven't seen before in the past.
Yeah, I don't think it's generational. So it doesn't matter whether we've got 64-year-old employees or 22 to encourage a stretch and flex mental mindset reset program, some breathing techniques on dealing with stress and or refocusing. So it's really not new. We've been dealing with this for years and years in the athletic world. And it's great tools, and it should be part of our process. It also increases the important component of our staff recognizes that we care about them and their well-being, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those are all really good things to consider. I'll take it a step further. I would be very surprised if our insurance companies don't force us in some way or another, maybe even government, but I don't know if government will get this far, but our insurance companies will force us to do stretch and flex programs and different things to relieve stress. Stress is a big component inside of contemplating and actually going through suicide. And there's an increase in suicidal thoughts and behavior inside of the construction mining industry. It's no big secret. There's people, not me, that are specializing in it.
Yeah.
So I see it as something down the road that as far as adaptability, start thinking about some of those things. And
Yep. Yeah, and then, we've already seen it with some of the companies that we work with in different contracts where it's actually in the contract of a mandatory time limit that they need to devote to stretch and flex. So it's on its way. But really, what does that mean? Do we complain about it and grumble and find ways around it? No, we double down on it because, I don't think too many people could argue that focusing on exercise, nutrition and breathing techniques and mindfulness and, things that can bring benefit to your body physically and mentally, can be skewed in any negative way. So let's double down on it. If it's going to work to improve our overall well-being, then let's really dive into it and embrace it and adapt to it. And then it's just some of this, again, if we go back to that, one of the obstacles that we saw before as far as some of the soft skills gaps and looking at generations and the age-old argument, our brains are wired differently, and that's absolutely true. So with the some of the advances in technology and definitely cell phones, I would say that the generations we see today are wired differently. And that also means they're wired for greater levels of anxiety and depression because of that device. So it's even more of a focus and even more of an initiative that we really have those self-care strategies as part of our culture and part of our programs that we have for our organization.
great. Well, we appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts and ideas over the 3-part seminar webinar series. We're always available to talk shop, share information, ideas. This is something that we're very passionate about, and we would recommend all of you get much more passionate to the point where we're relatively nerdy on it, but we recognize how important it is to deal with the people and your other key components like productivity and like quality and safety. They will be a byproduct of this. It's really, really important that you dive into the leadership space and spend time with your leaders and yourself and your skill set in order to continue to work with the people inside of the environments that we work in. You will be far more successful in the competition if you take that path. So our website, you can get our email addresses, you can reach out to us directly. Our phone number's on there. Happy to talk shop anytime. And we look forward to seeing you in future webinars.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.